Sorry about that long delay. Live
He was
events.
showing me baby pictures.
Yeah, that's true. Actually, this is my first day back from paternity leave.
Noah, very cute baby.
Throw you right into the deep end here.
Yay! He's had all this time to think about questions.
Yeah.
Super problematic.
It's going to be a problem, yeah. Senator, thank you so much for joining us. We do not have a lot of time, and we have a lot of ground to cover, so I'm going to jump right in. And I want us to talk about free speech on the internet to start. You've been smack in the middle of the congressional fight over online content moderation for the better part of a decade. And days after...
And I've done so well. No,
yeah,
okay,
it's
going.
been, fits and starts.
Okay.
And in the days after the horrific assassination of Charlie Kirk, that fight is actually taking a pretty strange turn. It's worth noting that there's still a lot we don't know about the killer's motive, among other details. But many Republicans who, as you know, you work with them all the time, they have styled themselves as champions of free speech on the internet. They are now seeking to suppress social media posts and platforms that they believe have downplayed Kirk's murder or somehow denigrated his legacy. So I just want to give you a few examples. At the urging of the vice president, conservative activists are scouring social media posts trying to get people fired. Attorney General Pam Bondi said the government will go after people that she accused of trafficking in hate speech. Senator Mike Lee is asking why Apple won't kick platforms like Blue Sky or Reddit off of their app store for what he calls hosting extremist content. And Republican Congressman Clay Higgins has called for private citizens who make light of Kirk's killing online to be banned for life from all social media. So just to open this, what's your reaction to all that rhetoric and calls from Republicans?
All right, so I got to step back a little because, as you probably know, we have had a horrific spate of murders in my own state by people who left ramblings or manifestos that kind of gave some clue to where they were coming from. And I am against censorship. I'm the daughter of a newspaperman, so I believe strongly in free speech. But at the same time, I have long advocated to try to put in some liability when it comes to, and I think that's one way you can do it without the government being as involved when it comes to things that are showing up on these platforms. So to first, the Kirk horrific murder. I actually opened my remarks today in the questions of FBI Director Patel. It might be worth looking at those questions because I said, you lost a friend. I am so sorry. I also lost a friend in Speaker Hortman from Minnesota. And one of the things that's a hallmark of some of these shootings is when we find out extreme views. And it can be, in fact, the shooter in the Annunciation Church in Minnesota, while those were not politicians who were victims, the manifesto was very political. And the FBI actually said that this shooter was an all-purpose hater. Hated Muslims, hated Jews, hated blacks, hated Hispanics, hated the president. In the Bolter case, the murder in Minneapolis, in the Minnesota area, of Melissa Hortman, that person had a long list of targeted Democratic lawmakers. And I pointed out today to Director Patel that a Cato Institute report that came out just this week noted that it's like 6-to-1 for people from the right involved in some of these murders than left. And then I said, but you know what? I really don't care about that. What I care about is we actually get something done. So to answer your question, without engaging in censorship and certainly not targeting groups on the left or on the right, what we can do is put in place, number one, some gun laws. And while the assault weapon ban would not have made a difference in the Kirk killing, it certainly would have in the church killings and in Uvalde and in Buffalo. And even if you went to one proposal that was out there that Senator Manchin supported of putting the assault weapons purchase age to 21. Those two shooters in Buffalo and Uvalde were 18. They waited till they turned 18 to buy assault weapons. So if you put an assault weapon ban at that age, it would make it. Second thing, social media. Yeah. On that front, I know that's what we're here for, but I do think people need to see the bigger picture when you look at solutions. And that is repealing Section 230. I've always been there for quite a while, not forever. I was hoping for other solutions, and they've just eluded us. So that is one way. I know you had Senator Cruz on earlier. He and I passed the Take It Down Act with the First Lady's support and with the President's signature, which basically says that this AI-created or real non-consensual porn, regardless of age, has to go down in 48 hours. And that there can be liability against the perpetrators of it.
Yeah, and I'm gonna get to section.
But my answer to you is I'm not for censorship, but I do think that more has to be done online, because when you look at the through line, I don't care if they're coming from the left or the right, they either are trying to perform for postings in social media, they are indicating what they're going to do on some kind of platform, or they are getting ideas of what to do, like the person who bludgeoned Speaker Pelosi's husband to death.
Okay, so
not to death, but to be severe injured.
Yeah, so this isn't a moment where you see sort of a political realignment that's possible, because I'm looking at this, and look, again, I don't have to tell you, for at least since 2017, the sort of dynamic has been Republicans tell the platforms, look, you're taking down too much content. Democrats say hateful, divisive, disinformation, all sorts of different content that we find is contributing to a toxic environment, needs to be taken off the internet. Republicans say, no, free speech, let 1,000 flowers bloom. Now it seems like the Republicans at least are backing off from that in a pretty big way. And it's not just Kirk. I think that's been supercharged with his, again, tragic assassination. I think really since the start of the Trump administration, you've seen an increasing level of censorship and attempted censorship over things like criticism of the Israeli government, content of diversity, related to diversity, equity, or inclusion. And it kind of, to me, there's a political lane here where Democrats could sort of take up that free speech mantle. At the same time, your side has been, as I said, fretting about toxic spaces online long before Republicans were. I think there's evidence emerging that Kirk's killer was, for lack of a better term, probably internet poisoned. And so these toxic spaces, maybe there is a government role there, but there is this potential, I think, to track a new course as Democrats. So how are you thinking about that?
I've been on a new course for a while, in that I think that we should be working across the aisle. I said this to Director Patel in a very public sort of radioactive hearing, that I used the moment to tell the stories of those little kids, one of whose funeral I went to on Sunday, the memorial in Minnesota, where these parents are looking for solutions. Their kids were killed through bullets that went through stained glass windows. And they know they're very focused on the guns, and they asked me to work on it. But I also know from the work I've done as a former prosecutor, on violence, on fentanyl and drugs, on porn, and some of the things we're seeing online, that there is a better way here, and that these companies that are the biggest companies the world has ever seen seem to resist any kind of rules put in place, because that's how they were when they got started in a garage. And right now, the fact that you have liability for a snowmobile manufacturer out of Minnesota, or you have liability if a washing machine blows up, and you do not have liability when fentanyl is sold on a platform any clear way, and they use Section 230 as a protection, I think is a problem. And it's a problem for our democracy when we have AI created, and that's one of your subjects, sure. AI created videos, like what just happened to me. I wrote a piece about it in the New York Times, in which it looks so damn real. You're sitting there, you've got your actual staff behind you, your words are now, your mouth is moving with the words, and a bunch of people think it's real, even though that was clearly done, sort of a Sydney Sweeney theme on jeans, didn't really hurt me. But what you're going to see as we get closer and closer to the election, you're going to see more of that. And all I would suggest on that front, because this is our very democracy, is that you've got to have some rules in place. In my case, TikTok took it down. Meta put a thing that it's AI altered, and X wouldn't do anything. I mean, you have to have rules that either, if it crosses the constitutional line, that gray area where it's maybe parody, you're not going to be able to take it down. But you can have a rule, a federal law that says then it should be, say, digitally altered. That will give voters, that will give people an understanding that it's not really the candidate they love or the candidate they hate. Then for other stuff that are deepfakes, you should be able to take them down. And I believe the Constitution would allow that, and we can require that they be taken down. That's a bill that Senator Hawley and I have with regard to elections. So while you're talking about a new path, there has been a group of us ranging from Blackburn, Cruz, Hawley, Grassley, Durbin, Blumenthal, the list goes on. I'm not going to, depending on what the bill is, that have been willing to kind of, we'll say, jump the shark, work with each other across the aisle, and jump the aisle and say, we can't just do nothing. AI is going to give us great stuff. It is. I believe that, home of the Mayo Clinic in Minnesota. But if we don't put the guardrails in place, it's going to greatly hurt those advancements and greatly hurt my constituents.
So you feel, and whether it's AI regulation, social media regulation, reform for Section 230, you feel like there's a group of you on both sides of the aisle that have been working in good faith to kind of balance the concern for toxic content and misleading
and I
content
should
online.
mention Lindsey Graham as well, who asked Patel about it today.
So to balance all that with free speech, with First Amendment protections, right? And so I want to make sure I understand that. That's kind of what you're saying.
We know that, yeah.
Now there's this new group coming in, I think largely driven by the president and by many of his advisors, that do seem to be taking a different approach.
This week they're using the left argument, but I believe in the past it's been both sides. And I gave you the stats from the Cato Institute, and I'm not going to.
Are you worried it's going in a different direction? And
Of course I am. I don't think I said this at this hearing today. I think if you want to get this done, that's not how you proceed.
Okay, 'cause
if you want to get this done and be honest with people, you have to step back and look at these shootings as a whole and what kinds of violence and what kinds of lives have been ruined outside of shootings because of what's appearing online, and then you've got to come up solutions. No phones in the schools. I think that's a good thing.
And I want to touch on, sorry, Senator, I want to touch on what, your work so far, things that have been signed into law, things that are being worked on, how this could contribute potentially to some of the concerns we're seeing. And I want to zero in on Take It Down, which you mentioned earlier. Senator Cruz was here earlier. You worked with him on this legislation targeting non-consensual intimate imagery, including deepfake pornography. That has to be removed. In a joint address to Congress before Take It Down became law, President Trump said he wanted to, quote, use that bill for himself. He claimed that nobody gets treated worse online than he does. I think particularly in the context of a broader campaign against speech that the administration finds objectionable. I mean, what do you think he meant by that, with your bill specifically?
I wish I understood everything Donald Trump meant, but I know what that bill does, and that bill is specifically about pornography, non-consensual pornography, and it simply says that it has to be taken down off the platforms in 48 hours. Why did we do this bill? Because Mr. Patel's predecessor, Christopher Wray, testified with the FBI statistics a few years back how over 24 kids, around that number, were committing suicide every year. They put a picture, this isn't AI, a picture of themselves, sometimes now it's morphed into AI, but a picture of themselves out to find a girlfriend or boyfriend. They send it to one person, and it's either gets permeated through their world, through their school, or it turns out to not really be a new girlfriend or boyfriend. It turns out to be someone who starts blackmailing them, and then they threaten to put it out. And so these kids who are too young to know any world but the one they're in that right now because they're like 17 years old, they kill themselves. Or their life is ruined for a good part of their life. So that's what I'm talking about with that bill. So I don't know why that would be involving Donald Trump. But I do know that all of these issues are fraught because people try to use them on both sides. But I don't think I can use that as an excuse just because Pam Bondi or J.D. Vance is saying things that I believe are not correct about who should be targeted and what should be done, and I will stand up against that. That aside, I still believe that I've got an obligation to the people of this country to find some way to put some rules in place when it comes to these platforms. It's very clear if we just keep letting this go, it's going to get worse and worse. And it's very clear that we could actually do some things when you look at other countries or you look at things that are happening that could make a difference.
And your point's well taken. I don't know what kind of AI-enabled intimate imagery of the president is floating around on the internet. I hope there's not much. But I think given what we've seen from this administration writ large, and this is a savvy audience. You guys probably recognize that these kind of notice and takedown systems can be abused. You can say, hey, this AI parody of the president that I put up for political reasons gets flagged for Take It Down and that kind of thing. It's not the meaning of the law, but that's what happens.
Just to be very clear, the Take It Down is slowly on porn. The No Fakes Act that Senator Blackburn and Senator Blumenthal and Tillis and I have introduced, that would much more get to some of this deepfake activity that is not parody, because parody with the D, because that is protected by the Constitution. But all of this where people are stealing people's voices and their faces and the like, we came to an agreement on that bill. It was just reintroduced this year. That would get at some of this and allow, it's a little bit the same model that it can be taken down. And there are rights of action. If you don't do that, you're gonna run into what happened to me in this bizarre Sydney Sweeney Jean video where they had me literally saying that, you know, Democrats are too fat to wear jeans outside. So
and I would encourage the audience.
This is the kind of shit that's out there. So my point is, if we can't get that labeled somehow, so it says AI created, the next one is going to be a Democrat or Republican candidate. This is why Senator Hawley feels so strongly about this, where it's not funny, but it's just altered one sentence. So it says something really, really horrible. Or the picture that started to go viral after the 3 police officers were shot and killed in the line of duty in Minnesota, that showed a fake picture that showed me where I had been at a rally, but they put defund the police fake signs in people's hands. I will say the platforms marked all those because it was so heinous to do that after these officers were killed when I was the lead author of the bill funding the police.
And I would encourage everyone
and
to go
so in the federal, so I'm saying this stuff, that's just one very simple example. This stuff done weeks before an election or days before the election, no one's going to be able to tell if it's true or not unless there's some rules of the road in place, whether it's coming from the left or the right. They are not going to be able to tell. People saw that picture and they thought it was real. People saw the AI created Sydney Sweeney, This Is Just My Life, and I just judging online, 10% thought it was real. But that will become more and more sophisticated as this goes on. And we cannot have this in a democracy, and other countries have taken action on it.
And I would encourage everyone to go read the op-ed. I think it was the New York Times.
Yes.
Yeah. We got to pivot to something else.
Okay.
We could talk about speech forever, I think, on the internet. Broader AI regulation on Capitol Hill. Early this year, Congress got pretty close to banning states from passing any AI laws for the next decade. The effort's still a big priority for the Trump administration. You heard from White House Science Advisor Michael Krastios last week. Senator Cruz was up here a few minutes ago, and he said the congressional effort on AI preemption is not at all dead. Do you agree with that assessment?
Well, I think we have to create some federal laws that have teeth and are meaningful, but we are not near doing that right now, and that's why you have like the Elvis Act in Senator Blackburn's home state of Tennessee, and that's why states are taking action. There's some analogy with privacy law. I would have moved on a federal privacy law a long time ago. The companies were lobbying against it big time. Then what happened? The states start acting. Then it's more California and New York. Now more states are getting in the game. Maybe that will finally get us a federal privacy law that's good enough to protect consumers. And so I say that because more states are kind of upping the game on that. The same thing, which could be part of an AI bill, could happen. But I was not in favor of preempting all the states when we don't have anything going and we're always getting lobbied against. Do I think that a number of AI companies legitimately want to see some rules of the road? Yes, I do. And we had very good meetings to discuss potential legislation that were well attended, that Senator Schumer and Rounds and Heinrich and Young conducted. I think I was the only one that went to every single one of them, to really dig in on what should be done. Senator Thune and I have a base bill that we are going to reintroduce for non-defense applications of AI.
Where is that?
That is going to be reintroduced. We're working. No, I mean, the point is that that's why your original question was, why did I not want to preempt all the state laws? Because we're still not moving on this. I've talked to the speaker. I do believe that this, just as there could be some meeting the minds on what we need to do when it comes to some of the violent content, that there also could be some meeting of the minds on privacy and AI now. But right now, I know this is a spoiler alert, but Democrats don't run the Congress. Ooh, did you notice?
But they need
And
60
so,
votes.
you know,
They're
there is a special obligation on those that are running the House and the Senate and the White House to come forward and work with us. And sadly, with regard to the budget coming up, the president just said that he didn't care about our vote. So.
Yeah.
And so I believe that these areas have the potential, because of what's been done, the groundwork leading into this, years of work on AI, the companies, a number of them wanting us to put some rules of the road in place, the consumer groups, the Thune bill, we had a lot of support for that bill. It was just a base, wasn't a content bill, but it was a base bill about non-defense uses. And then there has been some meeting of the minds among certain people on that we need to have labels on some of these videos. And if we don't have labels, then some of the worst stuff has to be taken down. That to me doesn't sound like a radical regime. That sounds like a regime that will allow these companies to keep flourishing and expanding. If there could be some of the lead companies, and they have from time to time, that come out for some of these bills, like YouTube supports the No Fakes Act, right? So that is what we hope to see going forward. I just don't know how else we're going to do this.
Yeah, and so what I'm hearing is no Democratic support for state preemption until you get some sort of federal rules of the road, which I think is pretty on brand.
I don't think that, and a number of Republicans felt the same way, or we wouldn't have been able to defeat that.
So stay tuned to that. We're running out of time, but I do want to ask one more question on antitrust. Okay. Antitrust was promised, so we're going to get there.
I wrote the book called Antitrust.
She did. It literally was called
It was on the New York Times bestseller for 2 weeks, and it got kicked out by like Oprah. I don't know.
Imagine that, right? Yeah. So antitrust is a sexier topic in Washington than I think the country writ large, but it continues to be a big topic in D.C., particularly where the tech industry is concerned. You've spent years urging aggressive enforcement against giants like Google and Meta. We're starting to see the end game of some of those efforts play out in federal court, and frankly, I'm not sure that those rulings are going your way. So take the recent decision on Google's monopoly in online search. A judge did find they have
Judge Meta.
Judge Meta, yeah. There is also a Meta case, but that's not the, The fix that the judge announced fell well short of a breakup, which I think some advocates were hoping for. The judge said he was unwilling to break up the company Google because he thinks it is already facing growing pressure from generative AI. Meta is actually making a similar argument in its own case. The generative AI and also the rise of TikTok it no longer has a monopoly, basically. There is competition. Competition is flourishing. The tech industry is incredibly dynamic, fast-moving. Antitrust cases are slow. The probes take years. The cases take even longer. Is antitrust enforcement doomed to always run several years behind the tech industry?
It is enforcement, so it's going to come after things happen.
Yeah.
But I don't think it has to fall that much behind, and I think what we really need to do is have some rules of the road in place that will accommodate the fact that we know these are fast-moving areas. I just do not buy the agreement that monopolies are good for capitalism. I come at antitrust from having worked in the private sector for 13, 14 years, having represented MCI when they were getting into the market. I'm really dating myself now. So that's where my heart is. It's pro-capitalism. So when I look at some of this stuff and I see this decision, which did some things when it comes to data sharing and the like, but really didn't get in the heart of it, and it was very disappointing. That's a nice Minnesota euphemism. I get to, okay, well, now we have to pass the law that Senator Grassley and I have, the bill that we have, that the industry spent hundreds of millions of dollars against in ads. And this would, at its core, say you can't self-preference your own products at the top of your search engine or at the top of your products, resulting in, by the way, pop-up ads against me in this very town that said I was going to take down FaceTime and that I would destroy Google Maps. All my colleagues thought this was quite funny that I was this powerful. But I really believe if you're going to, with that, especially that court decision and the bipartisan support, and this is how the AT&T breakup happened, that was good for long distance rates, that worked fine for AT&T. The reason that we have the antitrust laws, they've always been bipartisan when they've worked best over Democrat, Republican administration, is so we can have capitalism. And you go way back to what Adam Smith said, where he talked about beware the standing army of monopolies. You always have to have some pushback in a capitalist system if you believe in small business and you believe in things moving. So to me, if this is what the court cases are going to be, I'm not surprised with all the decisions we've gotten over the last decades out of the Supreme Court, then we need to pass some bills so that we can make sure there's this balance in terms of allowing new businesses to get in and be the next Google or the next Facebook, and not have gigantic monopolies dominating these areas.
Okay, and we'll have to, that's a long-running legislative fight.
That is not to get rid of these companies, that is to simply make sure that we have competition and consumers are protected.
Yeah, and we'll see where that fight goes. It obviously sort of reached a peak a few years ago, but it is a bipartisan effort, so we're going to have to just truck away at that, I guess.